Hey everyone, welcome back to another day, day 5 of actually Angular getting started. Yesterday we did completed the basics. Hey Krishna, hi. We completed the template syntax, and now we have to start with Angular architecture, and then we have to move on to component lifecycle loops. It's so for Angular architecture, I'm actually going to refer to the Angular documentation here itself. So you have where is that? Statics, accessibility, I think understanding Angular. Okay, so component class, no, not this one, but where is that? See, okay, so looks like there are some changes. So new libraries, Angular production to module, probably it should be here. Okay, so this is the one. So let's move. Let's open the image in new tab. Yeah. Uh, so they and the order is changed. So it's moved to references now. Earlier it was available above. So this is the architecture diagram which you have on the Angular.io website itself. So what you actually understand from this Angular architecture diagram, right? So let's see that. So in Angular, you can have a lot of Angular modules, of course. So this is what is available here. So you have module component, module services, module value, module function, which we will discuss about later on. But let's see what's the most important part of your Angular architecture. So if you see this, it's actually your component. So as we have already seen and saw a little bit about components, so this is your component.ts file. This is metadata. So if you have to actually relate this to your component, which is available here, so this properties, right? So selector, template URL, style URL, this is your metadata. And then you have template. So of course, every component will have its own template. And apart from that, if you see this injector, which is of course a service which we have not seen so far. So you can see services are actually coming towards your component. So it means you can go ahead and use services if required, but it's dotted line. So remember, this dotted line means optional. So it's not mandatory that you should have services, but as your application, as we see, as we will move ahead, you will see the importance of the services in Angular. It's really important. Then we have directives here. So again, you see directives, they are coming towards your template. So it's like generally I like to call directives as helper function to your templates or your HTML tags. So it's again, it's dotted line which is coming towards your template, right? So which means this is again optional, and directives can have its own metadata. So that's what you have into this diagram. And the next thing which we have to talk about is the Angular modules. So this is generally the developers who actually transition from TypeScript or JavaScript to Angular, right? So uh, TypeScript and JavaScript also have something called ES modules, right? So we spoke about ES modules when we were talking about TypeScript. So what's the difference between Angular modules and TypeScript modules? So remember, ES module, sorry. So whenever we talk about ES modules, so every JavaScript file or TypeScript file, right? It's a module. It's a ES module. So I can just go ahead and export anything and then import this. code into another file probably whenever it is needed, right? For example, we did this one interface. So this is our ES module, and then we imported this into our product component or TS. But when we talk about Angular modules is a class. Okay, it's a class with ng module decorator. So that's the difference. So don't get confused with ES module and Angular modules. They are not same. Now let's move on to the next part. So we have to actually start with component lifecycle looks, and these are component lifecycle looks which exist in Angular. So you have ng on init, ng on changes, ng do check, ng after content init, after content checked, after view init, and after view checked, and at the end we have ng on destroy. So we will go through one by one. We'll discuss about all the lifecycle looks which we have, and we will also talk about few concepts which actually is really important to understand when we talk about this lifecycle looks. For example, component communication, right? So using input and output, change detection strategy. So let's see. So first lifecycle look which we are going to talk about is ng on init. So let's implement. So if you remember yesterday, I removed one of the implements on init method, and I said, okay, we will discuss about it later on. So this every lifecycle look, right? So let's try to understand what lifecycle looks are. So when your component gets initialized, there are few events which will happen in a sequence. So let's try to relate this to, for example, if you're coming from any other background like .NET or Java, and you ever heard about ASP.NET and JSP, they already had this page lifecycle events. So you can always compare those events to those events. Even your React component also has events, but as we are not talking about React here, it's Angular. So remember something like this. So for example, every component will be initialized, and at the end it will be destroyed, and between that there will be multiple events which will happen, and those are your lifecycle events, right? So first lifecycle events which always happens is your view your sorry not your view, your component will be initialized. So it will be at this moment actually your component has initialized and everything is available on your view. So this is the best event, or you can say the best lifecycle event which can be used so to actually bind some data. So in case you have some, let's say, backend available, you are getting some data from your backend from your API. So ng on init is the best place where you can actually call those APIs and load the data. So we will try to do the same. So here what we will do is first we have already added implements on init, and let's add the lifecycle look, which is ng on init. So every lifecycle look has an interface, and so you can just click on this, and it will tell you which method it actually exposes. So ng on init. So here, when your components gets initialized, so this will be the method which this will be the lifecycle event which will be called. And again, in case you're coming from a JavaScript background, so let's read about what is this, right? So a callback method that is invoked immediately after the default change director has checked the directives data bound properties for the first time, and before any of the view or content children has been checked. It is invoked only once when a directive is instantiated. So we don't know about anything about change detection right now, but it's a so all the lifecycle hooks, right? So they are actually a callback method which gets called after something has happened. So here, ng on init is something which will be called for the first time when your view is initialized. And let's do this. I'll remove this and add this code here. For example, let's say I'm this method. Sorry. So let's assume that okay, this data is actually coming from your backend, and once we actually assign this data, this should be available on my view. So I have moved this code from load product to here. So let's see what happens in this case, right? And we are not calling any event manually. So let's go ahead and run this application again, now. So I'll say okay, ng serve hyphen o. Hmm. So you can see your data is still actually available. We are not calling anything, but this is something which is happening via lifecycle looks, because on init, as we said, it is the first event which will be called once your your component is initialized. So I can actually go ahead and assign this data. Uh, Make sure if you have any API calls, you are not doing that inside constructor, because before even your ng on init, constructors get called, right? So constructors are actually called because it's responsible for creating your instance. So make sure you are not calling any API calls inside constructor. I have seen a lot of code where developers do that, but try to avoid it, because constructor, I mean, your component should be initialized, or the instance of your component should be created as soon as possible. So there shouldn't be any delay. So move any asynchronous code in case you have, including your API calls, into ng on init. Don't write them inside the constructor. Okay. So this is the first event as we spoke about. And now let's do one more thing. I mean, we can see, of course, we have some information on our component which is available, but it doesn't look good, right? So what we can do is of course, I know most of the developers now today use Tailwind CSS, but we will see that later on. And first thing which we will do is we will use Bootstrap, right? So we can actually use Bootstrap CSS to design our page. So I'll include Bootstrap CSS. There are two libraries which are available. I'm not sure for whatever reason, but you have NGX Bootstrap and NG Bootstrap, right? So you can use anyone. So earlier it was like one of them had only support for Bootstrap 3, and now both support Bootstrap 4. So you can choose whichever you want. Probably they don't speak to each other, so probably that's why we have two components for same library. So let's use ng bootstrap here to add bootstrap css to our application. So and then we will move on to some next lifecycle loop, right? So I have so they have this ng add schematic available. Hmm. So it is unable to find compatible package using latest package has unmade peer dependencies. Okay. uh, yeah, let's execute, because of course I'm not going to use any component, but what I want to use is Bootstrap CSS, which is compatible with anything, right? I mean, doesn't have to be any specific Angular version. So that's what I need right now. This is one thing in case you are, I actually got this error yesterday while actually writing schematic for our own library, which is Lumberjack. So in case you get the same error while writing schematic, it's a really small change in v12. So you have to just go ahead and update in schema.json. You have id property, you have to just rename it to $id. That's it. So let's see what this schematic has done for us right now. So if I go to this, you will find that in a style.scss you have Bootstrap installed. So Bootstrap, it actually refers to node modules. So you can see path here. So it says node modules, Bootstrap SCSS, and Bootstrap SCSS. So this is the style sheet which will be loaded. And there are some polyfills which got added. So it's localized in it. So this is also added by this schematic. And then of course it will install Bootstrap, ng Bootstrap, this libraries, right? So what we needed is just Bootstrap. So let's now run the application again. And you will see, okay, some changes in font, because of course that's what Bootstrap does. By default it actually includes fonts and everything. And actually there is a plan to include probably Tailwind CSS at the end as well. So let's see. So I'll be including Angular material, and then we'll talk about Tailwind CSS a little bit. Okay, so done. So now we have our application which is ready and loaded. So hmm. So you can see, I think The changes are a little bit visible because your font has changed. So earlier the font was different and even the table is different, right? So let's go ahead and apply a class to our table. So let's move on to product component.css, sorry, HTML, and I can just add here, right? So I can just add a class, which is table. And it will this class table will actually make my table responsive, and you can see actually just by adding a class we have a responsive table now. So if I just change this, I mean minimize this, so you will see, okay, this table becomes responsive now. So I can go to this inspect, and you can even go to mobile and it will be like this. The only problem is, of course, your due to your dead format, everything is like wrapped. The entire content is wrapped, but we can change the format of the table, which we are going to do next probably. Now we have included Bootstrap, so our table looks a little bit nice, right? I mean, it doesn't look that bad. So let's move on, and we will talk about our next lifecycle loop, which we have. Let's see. So we are going to talk about ng on changes, but before we can go ahead and talk about ng on changes, we have to learn about component communication using input and output. So in case you are not aware, there are three ways you can actually communicate between component. But why? But before we actually go ahead and talk about component communication, why component communication is required? So remember, using Angular, what you are going to do is you are going to create an application and you are going to create a number of components, and there will be requirement, there will be scenarios where your multiple components need to talk to each other. Probably they need to pass some data, they need to listen to some events. How you will be able to do it? So there are three ways. First is, of course, using input and output. Second is using your view child, view children, and third is using your services. So you can also go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and see how we can actually communicate between two components using input and output. So what we are going to do is we will create, if you already have this, looks like. So let's see this product, right? So right now, if you see our product component uh, also has product list component. Okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to split this into a separate component. It's always suggested that in case you have a big feature, try to split them into smaller components so it becomes easy to manage in future. Don't create a component which has like 3000 of lines of code, or like thousands lines of HTML. Try to split them into as small as possible. So you can have multiple components, smaller components, rather than actually having a big one. So let's do it from the day one, right? So I mean, we know now that, okay, we have product component and we are also doing or also have a functionality for list inside the product component. Why not to split them up? So let's create a new component, product list, and that will contain, or that will have only functionality related to the list component. So we will expand it, but let's start small, right? So uh, what we will do is we will create a new component. So I'll go to integrated terminal. I'll go inside product, as I said, right? So if you remember, while creating components, you can actually do it from root, or you can be inside a product, inside a folder as well. So as my product list component is actually related to product component, I am going to do or add it inside the product component. So let's go ahead and do that. So nggc and product. So this is how I will name it, product hyphen list. So you have a new folder inside product called product list, and this is your product list component. And what we will do is we all the list related things will be here, and let's see, and we will communicate with input and output. So let's see how we can do that. So first, let's move this entire table inside this HTML. Okay, so right now, of course, it is giving me error that, okay, products does not exist. Let's go ahead and create a property here, which is type of product interface is equals to an empty array. So what we are doing is we are creating two components, a product and product list, and they are also known as parent and child component. So here, what I am going to do is I am going to render this product list component on my product component. So let's do this first and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So what I want to do is I have a product list component where I can actually pass some product data, and that product list component will be responsible for displaying all the products. So it doesn't know from where it is going to get the data. I mean, it's not mandatory that I have to use it in product. I can use it anywhere. Let's say I can even use this product list component on my orders page, right? Because orders are what? They also list all the products information as well, and few other metadata. So I can use it wherever I want. But this product list component will be actually a reusable component which doesn't care about from where it is going to get the data. So it will not have any information about the data. So first thing achieved. So right now my component, this product list component, does not know anything about the data. So it has a property called products, but there is no data which is available. So if I see my application, of course, we will not get anything here. So let's see, localhost 4200. So it says failed to compile. Probably, okay, I have to run it again, right? So no, it's already running. So let's see. So it says, okay, track by, right? So we are not passing anything related to track by. So probably we can also copy this track by from here to here. So at least our application will compile. So our expectation is to get nothing, right? So if you inspect this element, you will find, okay, let's see. It's our body, ecom root, div, and nothing, right? So ecom product and button, ecom product list, but it is empty because it doesn't contain any data as of now. So let's see how we can actually communicate between this two component. The component which does not have any information about data, so it has to get the data from someone. And in such cases, your parent component, what is parent component here? So any component which actually renders ecom product list is the parent component. So it doesn't have to be product. As I said, it can be anyone. So this parent component will be responsible for sending the data to your child component. Now this relationship also, so there are multiple terms which we use. So you may, if you hear about parent and child component, this is what we are talking about. If you see someone talking about container and presenter, this is what we talk about. This is the same thing. And if you see someone talking about smart component and dumb component, this is again the same concept. So now let's move on, right? So we know several terms which is used for this kind of relationship. So my child component now needs the data. So, and now we know that, okay, my parent component will be responsible for sending this data. So how your child component can receive the data? So it's via property. So remember property binding, we discussed about property binding earlier. So we said any valid tag, right? So any valid tag and any, I can assign the values to its any valid property. So if there is a tag and it has an valid property, I can assign the data. For example, we took the example of div where we used inner text. Similarly, if I go to this product list component, this product is a property, right? So it's a property which is available. So what we can do using this approach, we can actually mark it as, or we can actually convert this property, which is right now a class property, to a valid HTML tag property. So if I talk about this selector, what is this? We have already spoken about that. Okay, this selector property is your HTML tag. So I can convert this property to a valid property of this HTML tag by using a decorator called input. So if I use this input here, now this property is actually exposed as a valid property of this HTML tag. So what I can do is I can use the property binding, right? So I can say products is equals to some value. So now my parent already has the value, right? So let's go to product component.ts and we have something known as products here. So let's rename it to product list just to avoid the confusion, because products is equal to products. I generally get confused. I'm not sure about others, but whenever I see same property being used, actually I think that they are same, which is not right. So here now we have product list. So what I can do is I can pass this value here. So I can say products is equal to product list. And now as this input, this is marked as input. So now Angular knows that, okay, this is a valid HTML property now to this HTML tag. It will receive the data. And let's go back and see. So you have your data back. You might be wondering where the CSS is gone, because CSS is available here. I can just move this from here to here, and it will be back as well, right? So because it was available on parent. So now what we have done is we have achieved the communication between two components. Is it? No, right? I mean, we can just now what we have achieved is my parent can pass the data to child. That is something which we have achieved. What about child? I mean, my child should be also able to communicate with my parent, maybe. So why should we? Remember, so whenever you are actually creating a component, smart component, dumb component, or parent or child component, remember your parent component should be responsible for handling any business rules. Your child component should not do anything. I mean, your child component should ask. So for example, let's talk about real time scenario, right? So you have a kid. So your kid doesn't do, most of the time they don't do anything, right? So they just ask the parent, okay, I need this or I need that. Similarly, whenever you just keep this concept in mind. So whenever you are creating a component, which is dumb component or child component, your child component should not do any action. Your child component should ask. So for example, let's say I want to select some data or I want to delete some data. So my child component should be responsible for telling my parent, okay, this is the data which I want to delete. But your child component should not do any action by its own. So in such cases, of course, you need to talk to your parent. So how we can achieve that? So there are two concepts which we learned. So we applied property binding to actually receive the data. Hey Ankit, yeah. So it was raining. So now so we now actually know that, okay, using property binding, I can actually send the data to my child. Now the other concept which we had learned about, which is event binding, right? So by using event binding, what we can do is my child component can also speak to parent. I mean, but what it should tell my parent, okay, I want to perform this action. Never make any API call inside your child component, right? So please make sure that whenever you are designing your application, try to create smaller components. And in case you have a reusable component, your reusable component or your child component, which has input and output, should not do a lot of business rules or should not write business rules. Uh, Rather than that, it should be actually given back to the parent, and your parent should actually do whatever the action which needs to be done. I mean, making an API call or whatever. So let's see how we can achieve that. So what we are going to do is, let's add one more column here, right? So we will call that column as an action, and we'll say select. So whatever row we select, we are actually going to send the data back to my parent component, which is product component. So let's add, so I'll say, okay, this is th action, and then I can add here, I can say td, and as I said, I'm going to call it as select. Oh, sorry, actually I'm going to have a button here, and I'll use some Bootstrap CSS. So I can say class btn success. And on click, we want to perform some operation. Of course, that is needed. So I'll write that function and then I'll call it as select. And let's write the event for this particular component. So this event is something which will be responsible for sending the data to parent. So I'll create this event by using output tag. So sorry, output decorator. And then I'll say this is select. This is the name of event. So don't try to append. So this is an NT pattern. So you should not do something like this on select or something, because it is not suggested. It can actually conflict with any valid events, which is of course which can cause conflict. So don't do that. So here I can say select product or something like that, right? So select product is equals to, now to create events, Angular has a special syntax. So it has a special class called new event emitter. Let's make sure that we are okay. So it is actually got imported from node events. So which is not what we need. We need event emitter from core, Angular core. And then you can pass. So event emitter takes a parameter of type T, which means it is and generics. And what you can define here, so you can define what kind of data will be emitted once this event is called. So for example, on click, so whenever you perform on click button, what is written? So nothing, right? So it's void. But there are few events which may return something. So similarly here, this event will be responsible for sending a product, a single product. So what I can do is I can use product interface here. So I'm saying that whenever this event is emitted, what it will send is a product. And once this is done, let's go ahead and implement the select product. So select function. So here I'm writing select. This will be my function. Great. And now we need the data for the row in which this button is clicked. So how you can get access to that particular product is actually this ng-for, right? With this else of ng-for. So this product is actually each product. So if I pass this product here, it means I'm passing the current row on whichever row I click. So now once this is done, I can just select, go ahead and pass this here. So I can say product, which is type of product. And now I have all the data. So let's do a console.log before we actually go ahead and send this data back to parent. So I can say product. Let's move. Let's inspect and go to console. Let's clear the console and let's click on select. So this is ID1, select here. This is ID2, select here. This is ID3. So this is working fine. Now the next thing which we have to do is send this data back to parent. How we can do that? So here we can use this event which we have created. So I can do something like this dot select product dot emit and emit this data which is coming from which is coming from the button click. Done. So now we are emitting this data. Now in my parent component, remember it can be anyone, right? So in my parent component, I can just subscribe to this event by using select product, the event name. Okay, so select product is equals to a function which will be implemented by my parent, because now my parent has to decide what to do with this data. So it will implement a function. So I can say receive, or let's say I can call it as delete product, right? So whatever, I'm not going to delete it, but just delete product. And then you have to pass dollar event here. So it will be always dollar event whenever there is something which is coming from your child. So we'll talk about what this dollar event is. Let's go to your parent component and let's implement this one, delete product. And what kind of data we are getting? So we are getting a product, which is type of product interface, which we have. And now here I can just do console.log right now. So I can say console.log, or let's create a property. So I'll create a property called selected product, which is type of product, and that's it. Okay, so this is strict mode, right? So I have to assign something, but it should be select product has no initializer. It is not. Let's see if I can do something here. This dot selected product is equals to this. No, I have to assign something. Let's use some utility function. So I can say this is partial. Right. So, okay. So this I have just taken some help from the utility function. So partial makes all properties optional. So I can just use this syntax like this. But remember, in case you are assigning some data, don't make it partial. Right now, I'm just taking the data, right? So I don't have to worry about. Let me just remove this. And now I can just use this property here. This dot selected product is equals to the product which we are getting from our child. And let's display this information on our template. So I can just do here. I can use pre-tag, right? So I can use pre-tag with selected product and JSON. And yeah, this is okay. So let's see, let's go ahead and see what we have done so far. So we created a selected product. We created an event by using output tag, and then we took help from Angular core. We said we want to create a new event emitter, and which will emit a single product whenever this event is emitted. We added a button here, and then we said there is a select function, and whenever we click on this select function, we get the product, selected product in that particular row. Then we wrote this select function. We checked if I am getting the product, select current product from that particular row. And then we added this line. We said, okay, now go ahead and emit this selected product to my parent. In my parent component, I have to listen to this event. So we wrote this line. We said, okay, select product or selected product. You can do whatever you like. So selected product equals to delete product, which let's say just to denote that we want to delete this product. And then we pass dollar event. So this dollar event is actually something which comes from JavaScript itself. So it's like what kind of the event is raised, right? So we are getting it as an event data. And then in your component, you can actually go ahead and say, okay, this will be whatever type of data you are getting, right? So I'm getting product here. Then we created a select product property and assigning this product here and rendering the selected product just to verify that we are getting the data from our child component. Now time to actually go ahead and check if it works, right? So let's clear the console. Let's click on select, and you can see the ID1 is data for ID1 is available here. Select, and the ID for data 2 is available here. And now data for ID3 is available here. So it works. So this is how you can actually make sure that your child component remains dumb. You don't do any operation within your child component. Whatever it has to do, it will just send the data or send the event to your parent, and your parent will perform those actions by using output. With input, it can take the data. And of course, you can have this is another a question which generally developers who start with Angular get. Can I have multiple inputs? Of course, the answer is yes. You can have n number of properties you like. So let's add one more property of some primitive data, for example, string, right? So I can say input, and I can say this is title, and which is type of string is equals to um, an empty records, right? So I don't have any title as of now. And this title we will use here. So I can say, okay, this is h1 tag. And we can place our title property here. And let's pass the title property from here. So I can say this title is equals to, I can just pass directly a string value. So I can say this is product list. So let's see if it is compiled. Yes, it is compiled. Let's go back and see. And you can see the product list is available here, right? So the input property which we passed. And you might be wondering if here, right? So if you see, I'm not using box syntax here because I wanted to pass a string. So I can actually directly use it as it is. If I wanted to pass it as a variable, so I will use box syntax, and then my component itself will actually start giving me an error that, okay, this is something which is, this variable does not exist. So you can also pass a variable, but make sure you are using box. In case you have a string value or any other value, you can just pass it without a box. So apart from objects or objects, right? So for objects, we of course you have to use this, but for string values, you can directly go ahead and pass without using box syntax. So this is input and output, and of course you can have a number of output or events as well. So it doesn't has to be a single output event, right? Or event which is written in your child component. You can have multiple. So let's do one thing, do one more thing here. So I'll just, so I'll also at this point, let me just also introduce you to two things. First is of course the extension which I'm using. So there is something called Angular Essential. In case you need all the helper extensions for Angular, just go ahead and install this Angular Essential pack from John Papa. Or you can just use Angular language service in case you just need IntelliSense. Angular snippets is actually, if you remember yesterday, I was typing ng switch and then I got entire snippet. So it was coming because of Angular snippet. I use Prettier as well. So and Peacock is really useful. So I think Peacock. So you can actually give a different color to your uh, this editor. So let's use something. Let's use Angular red, right? So generally, in case you have multiple instances of VS Code running, you can actually differentiate it using this Peacock extension, which is again written by John Papa. So, but as of now, what you need is Angular language service, which will give you the IntelliSense. So remember, whenever I'm actually doing this, I'm getting this IntelliSense, what are the different properties or function which exist. So it is coming because of Angular language service. So go ahead and install Angular language service in case you need IntelliSense. And a second thing which I want to cover is how to debug your code, right? So which is really important. So I think we have written enough code to actually go ahead and see and go ahead and check how to go ahead and debug this code, right? So to debug your application, of course, you have to be in dev mode, and or if not in dev mode, make sure that this setting, as I said, you can create multiple environments, right? So in case you want to debug in any other environment, make sure this setting, which is source map, is true. So let's say you have staging and you want to make sure that you are able to debug your code in staging, you have to go ahead and enable the source map. So if you go to production, actually production has source map disabled by default, so you will not get any uh, option to debug your code. So right now it's enabled in dev mode. So let's go ahead and see how we can debug this code. So if you inspect, you can go to sources tab, and in sources tab you will find this dot folder. So all the files are actually, all the TypeScript files which we have written is available here. So you can go ahead and add the breakpoint to any line of any line, and you'll be able to debug this code. So you can add it here, and let's add here as well, right? So if I click on this select, you will see, okay, this is called, and you can see what data it has. So this is product, and this is the object which is available. Then this is the event emitter which is getting this data, and I can just play, and my debugger should come here, and you can see, okay, this is product, and it is assigning this product data. So this is how you can debug. Also, in case you want to search for a specific file, you can just press Control P, P for parrot, and you can enter the file name here. For example, I can say, okay, I need product.component.ts or list component.ts, right? So I can select this file from by using Control P. This is the same shortcut which is available in VS Code as well. So if I go to VS Code and press Control P, I can search for any file inside my entire code base. Okay, so your Chrome and this both has same shortcut, so you can easily navigate between the files. So now we know how to debug and how to actually communicate between two components using input and output. Let's move on and talk about the next concept. Okay. I'll close this and let's move on. So now we know about this component communication using input, and of course this is a really small example and really basic example, but this is how you should start, right? Try to simplify it, try to make it simple. Now let's go ahead and talk about ng on changes and and change section strategy as well. So why I covered this input and output? The reason being, the next lifecycle event which we have, which is ng on changes, is something which is related to this input and output. So not output, but basically input. So ng on changes is an event. This lifecycle loop can be only be used with a component which has input properties. Okay, so let's go ahead and write it. So I'll just go ahead and add here ng on changes. So you cannot implement this event, this lifecycle loop on product component.ts because product component.ts does not contain any input property. So here I'll say on changes, right? And then of course it has a function, so which we need to implement or callback. So I can use ng on changes here and void. And let's import the simple changes as well. Okay, so what we have done is we have implemented our ng on changes. Did we? Actually, we just wrote that, okay, there is an ng on changes event, and it you can see it doesn't actually provide any kind of data. It's just kind of type of void. Let's go ahead and write console.log, and we will say changes. Okay, so let's move on to our application. And let's go to console and let's see what type of data we get here. So if you see product list component.ts line number 27, and this line number 27 is of course this code. So what we are getting here, so it says, okay, this simple changes contains products and title information. So what we have here is, it says my products is had previous value, current value, and first change, three properties. Previous value was undefined, then first change is true, and the current value is this three records. Similarly, if I go to title, previous value was undefined, current value is product list, and first change is true. So what we are getting here, so by using ng on changes, I can actually watch for all changes which is happening on my input properties. So it will always, whenever you change the value, it will always give you the previous value and the current value, and it will always tell you, also give you a flag whether it's the first change or not. So let's say what you can achieve using these properties, right? So probably you can create log of values, for example, what is getting changed, right? So you can create a component which is responsible for logging what are the things which is getting changed. So you can take the help from previous value, current value, and also if it is the first change or not. And of course, there are many more real times in real time usage of this particular lifecycle loop. For example, if I want to detect some changes, which is, of course, we'll talk later on, but in case you want to detect some changes on your properties and you want to render something based on your data, that is something also can be achieved using ng on changes. But let's talk that later. Let's talk about that later. But right now, what we understood is using ng on changes, I can actually watch for all the changes which is happening on my input properties. So here the first value, previous values was of course undefined, and then we got the current value by assigning the values here. Now let's move. Let's do one more thing. Let's. I think we had this load product, not add product, right? So let's see if what happens when we do add product. So you can see, okay, there is a new value which is actually added here in table. If I click again, so you can see, okay, the same record is added here, but this is strange, right? Why my ng on changes is not getting called? Click again. Let's click on toggle table. Probably okay. Now it's not available, right? So this is not functional. But if you see, whenever you add add a new product, right? So it is getting reflected back in your table. But this is not, there is nothing which is getting changed on your this ng on changes, which is a little bit strange, which we will talk about in some time. But let's see how we can actually change the data. So if let's try to change the title. So I'll change this title to a property, and I'll say this is header, right? So I don't want to keep it same, so I can say this is header, which is type of string. So I'll say header is equals to product list. And what I will do is in toggle table, right? So this is something which is not used right now. So what I will do is I will assign a new header whenever I click on this button. So I'll say this is new product list. And let's save this. Let's go back. So at first time, what we got is we got two properties, that product and title. Let's click on toggle table. And now we got another property. I mean, the ng on changes is called. Why it is not called on add product? Don't care about it right now because we are going to talk about it. But here, so if I click on toggle table, I'm the ng on changes is getting called again. And what we have is we have this time only title property. We don't have products property. The reason being because at this time only the title was changed, not the product. So it will always watch for the changes on the property which is changed. So right now as title is changed, you will only get the title property. Keep this in mind in case you have a lot of input properties and you write some code which is actually not getting changed, you may get some error. So you have to make sure that, okay, you are trying to access some property which is getting changed, not something which is not. Otherwise, of course, you know, right, undefined, something of undefined, you may get those errors. So here it says, okay, previous value was product list. Of course it was. And now current value is new product list, which is updated as well here. So now as we know, okay, this works. I mean, it's not like that it doesn't work, but what's wrong with this add product? I mean, we are adding a new product, but it doesn't work. I mean, it works. We get a new data inside your table, but what is happening with ng on changes? So let's go ahead and see those. So here, remember, whenever you assign a value, but what kind of value? So whenever you assign a new value, at that point your ng on changes gets called. This is a confusion which happens when I started learning Angular. I was like, I mean, I kept writing the code. I was like, why it is not working? Why it is not working? So of course I went ahead and read a lot of resources and the some Angular courses as well, especially from Debug. Those are really nice courses. That's where I actually learned Angular. So then I realized, okay, what it means is whenever I get a new value, at that time ng on changes gets called. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing push, and this is where I was wrong. I mean, push will not return a new value. Push will just go ahead and mutate the existing object. So what I have to do is, in case I have to make sure that ng on changes captures this, I have to make sure that I'm adding, creating a new object. So how we can do that? So I can just go ahead and change this product list is equals to, remember we discussed about spread syntax. So I can go ahead and say this dot product list, comma, this object. And now I'll be emitting a new object, right? I will be creating a new object rather than actually mutating the same. So let's do now. So let's go ahead and do add product now. So let's clear this log, and 3 records, add product, 4 records, and you have now your ng on changes is also working fine. So it has previous value was 3, now current value is 4. This is how actually you can make it work to make sure that your ng on changes captures all the changes on your input. Make sure you are assigning a new object or you are creating a new object rather than mutating the object. It will never work. So this is something which you have to keep in mind while working with ng on changes. You can actually also do something like this. For example, let's say, example I can give. Okay, so let's say I want to have a property called product sum, which is equals to 0. And now on every property change, right, on every product change, what I want to do is I want to calculate the product sum of the product. So let's see how we can do that. So I'll say if changes dot, so I can say changes dot product. I mean, this property exists. That's what I'm checking here. And then I can say this dot product sum is equals to changes dot product dot current value dot as now it will not give you any intelligence, but what we can do is current value. So I know this is going to be a list. Reduce. Sorry, first I can do map, and I can say this is product, right? Each product, which is type of product, and then I can just take product dot price, and then I can call dot reduce. So A comma B, sorry, which is A plus B. So this is to calculate the sum of all products which we have. Probably this is the right syntax. Let's see. Let's format this one. A, which is type of number, B, which is again type of number, and then it returns A plus B. This is reduce, and okay, this is extra. Okay, so now we have this product sum, and let's display the sum here. So I can say this is H2, and I can say total price, and put this here, product sum, right? So let's see the code. So what we are doing is here, we are saying that, okay, whenever there is a change on product's property, go ahead and recalculate the product sum, which is of course your current, which takes products dot current value. And as we know that current value is an array, we are doing a map. We are taking the product dot price, and then for each row, I mean for the entire row, we are calling the reduce method, and then we are passing previous price plus current price, and then we are just adding both. I mean, I know this is a lot of code to write in a single line, but let's see. So it works, right? So I can see, okay, the price is total price is 120K. Let's add product, and you can see again it's getting updated. So these are some cool things which you can actually do using ng on changes. Great. So what we can do is we can take a few minutes break, probably 5 to 6 minutes, and then we'll be back In case you have any questions, feel free to actually post it in chat, and we will discuss about it once we are back. Okay, we are back. So let's see if you have any questions. No, there is no question. So let's move on now. So we have learned about, now we know about ng on changes, and we saw one example. Of course, a really small example, but yeah, uh, that's a well example, right? So whenever your product changes, we are calculating the product sum and we are displaying it. Now, the next thing which we are going to talk about is really important, and which is change detection strategy. So right now, we are going to use change detection strategy with our child components, because if you want to use it in parent component, we can do that, not a problem. But we have to actually learn about RxJS. We have to know about events. Sorry, we have to know about streams, which we will do later on. I'll also give you an example how you can actually use the change detection strategy on push on your parent component, and probably once we are done with this basic one, there will be a live stream for Rx template, which I really liked the way they are actually trying to resolve this issue. So let's go ahead and talk about change detection strategy first. So here, let's go back to the component. Yeah. So if you see this screen right now, so we have few components available here. So if you see, I mean, if you see code wise, we have three components. So we have your root component, we have product component, and then we have product list component. So how does change detections work here? So I'll go to elements, body, ecom, div, and let me just okay, let me do one thing. Me minimize this one. And this is the entire component, right? So if I click on some button, so let's say a toggle table is something which is changing the product list, but add product, okay, which is, let's see if we are changing anything here. I think we are not, probably. Product list, table, add product. So if you see, I mean, whenever there is a change, right? So if you see, I mean, there are a few values which are getting updated. So here you can see H2, T body. These are the values which are getting updated. So the way it works is, I mean, in Angular internally, so it creates a component tree. So I'll show you here. Agree, where is the tab gone for Angular? It's available for Chrome. So hmm. So this is, so I'm just using Augury as of now. You few, I mean, if you are not aware, Angular 12 is going to have a dedicated dev tool for Angular, which is supposed to be released in Angular 12, and it really looks nice. But let's see here. So if I see this entire application, we have few components available here. So app component, then you have this product, and then you have product list. So these are three components which are available, and you can actually have some more components like this, right? So this is your entire component tree. Angular actually runs from, so whenever there is something which is getting changed, Angular runs the change direction for each and every component starting from your top. So from app component to e-product list. So this is how it will run. So it will run the change detection. It will check if something has changed on your view, and it will re-render everything. The best way to see what is getting re-rendered is, of course, the DevTools, which is supposed to be released, or you can enable, I think we had already seen this. show painting rendering, show paint flashing rectangle. So let's click on add product, and you can see this entire product is getting re-rendered, right? So this is how you can actually figure out what is getting changed. Uh, so uh, 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 Read property one of null. I think this is something related to something else. Right? So add product. So you can see whatever is actually marked as green. Somehow I'm not sure why body is getting reflected. I mean re-rendered in few seconds. Something is going wrong. I'm not sure what, but it's probably something related to something else. But we cannot see the same behavior here. So it's something has to do with some of the extension which is running. So here you can see, right? So whatever is getting changed, only that will be reflected. So I can just enable uh, show. Hmm. And click on add product, and you can see, okay, what is whatever is green, it is getting changed. So now as we know that it is actually creates a tree, and then it runs the change action for each and every component which is part of your tree. It doesn't matter what is changed, but it will go ahead and re-render everything, which is costly, of course, in case you have a lot of components with this entire running the change direction for everything is costly. So there is a way to disable the change reduction for components for your component. So what will happen is the change direction for your component will only run in case there is something which is changed. How we can do that? Let's go ahead and see. This is where change direction strategy comes into picture. So I can go ahead and mark this component as, so I can say change direction, and I can say change direction strategy dot on push. The default is default. I mean, by default is default. Sorry. So in case you have, I mean, by default, in case anything which happens on your view, everything will be checked and it will be re-rendered. But I can disable that by using the change direction strategy on push. But of course, you have to keep few things in your mind while working on this. Let's go ahead and see that. So I have just changed the change direction strategy to on push, and there's nothing else. And you can see if I had, so of course I'm getting this data here, right? But let's move back to this code. If you remember, this code was also working fine. The only problem was on changes was not running. What in case I do this and I have change direction strategy on push available? Click on add product. Now in this case, you will see even the values are not getting changed inside your table. I mean, there is no new record which is added. So you have to always keep in your mind, whenever you use change detection strategy on push, you have to always go ahead and return a new object, which is, of course, you should have a habit of doing that, so you don't come into this or you don't come across this scenario. So always go ahead and return a new object wherever possible, rather than actually mutating the same object, right? So you can see now it will still work because we wrote the code in that way that, okay, it doesn't have, we don't have to do anything else. So whenever here we have also written ng on changes, and then inside ng on changes we are making sure the product sum is getting updated. But let's talk about one more scenario. And to do that, what we will, I'm thinking about a scenario, what we can do. Okay, let's try to do this. This dot title is equals to date from child. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm updating the input property internally from the component itself. Update from child is called. I think this will work because I'm assigning a new value. What kind of what I should do? Even if I try to add a new value, okay. So let's try to do one thing. Okay, let's see this. So what I'm doing is I'm going to add a product. This dot products dot push. So I'm adding a new product just for an example. There's nothing. Uh, Let's see if it works. Push. And let's see, this is 5, and we have this change direction strategy on push. Let's see if it happens. ID is 5, it works. So why I'm not getting an example here? Actually, I have to update one of the property inside the product to actually see this. So let's try to do this. This products of 0 dot price is equals to 60,000. Let's see if it is working. Change direction strategy on push. So okay, probably okay, I'm missing something. Okay, I mean, let's move on. So what we have done is we have, of course, we actually wrote the code in such a way that it will work with change direction strategy on push, and we are not getting any error. So keep in your mind, in case you are creating a child component, or you can say dumb component, you can actually go ahead and uh, mark them as on push as well. So what will happen in this case is whenever I do something else, for example, let's do this. I'll click on this toggle button, right? So this toggle button, let's see what is getting changed here. Right, so we have an e-product list and e-product and everything is available. Click on toggle. So you can see what is getting changed. You can see e-product list will never be re-rendered. Right, so e-product list will be only changed when there are actually some changes. For example, let's click on add product. So in when we click on add product, what is happening is we are getting some changes into table. Why? Remember, we have also added this track by changes, right? Track by property. So here, if you see this, even not the entire table which is getting re-rendered, only a new row is getting added. So click on add product again, and you will see the S2 is getting updated, which is of course your total price, and then there was a new TR tag which is getting updated. If you remove the track by, what will happen is your entire table will be re-rendered again. So we already had track by, we already did some optimization, and now on top of it we have change direction strategy on push, so which will not re-render this entire data. So make sure you are using both in case you have some list of records to make your application perform better. So let's go ahead and see what next. So we are not done with ng on changes. I think we took enough example. So uh, let's talk about ng do check now. So ng do check is something which will track the changes. So of course the name is check, right? So it will check for something. So what is that something? So ng do check is something which will track for any changes or any events which is getting raised inside the application. So if I implement it anywhere, so let's say if I implement it on product component and something gets changed on my root component, it will still go ahead and capture that. I mean, it will still go ahead and say, okay, something has changed. I mean, this is not going to tell you what has changed, but this is something. This lifecycle look is lifecycle look is available for special scenarios when you think, okay, all the lifecycle events which are available are actually something which you cannot use, but you have to track if some property is getting changed anywhere inside your application. Probably, let's say a simple example which we can take is logout, right? So if on logout, whenever logout happens, you want to actually go ahead and capture that event, and you want to perform some operation. So what you can do is probably do check is one of the places where you can do it. Do check is really costly because it will be called for every event which is happening inside your application. So for example, let's implement here, and it is not advised to actually implement ng do check in a component which already has on changes, because on changes will actually keep looking for any changes on your input property, and do check is going to do the same. So you may find it running twice. So let's use do check, and here, and it gets called in terms of lifecycle event. If you're wondering where it gets called, I think we also didn't discuss where your ng on changes gets called. So ng on changes gets called before ng on init once, and after that whenever your input property changes. Remember, before ng on init only once, so here once before ng on changes, and after that whenever input property changes it will be called. So in terms of ng do check will be called after every lifecycle loop after any event is raised. So let's do ng do check, and here I'll just do console.log. So I can say do check is called. Let's go back to our application and see what is happening here. So let's go to console. So you can see, okay, this is do check is called. So what happened here? So of course, so after ng on init, right? So even in case of after ng on init, it will be called again. So let's click on add product. Do check is called. Let's click on this toggle, which is not related to anything related to product. Again, it is called. Let's click on load product. Again, you can see do check is called. Toggle table, which is not doing anything right now, but still the do check is called. So any events, any lifecycle loop, it will be called after that. So keep this in mind. Do check is really costly. I have not implemented ng do check so far anywhere, or I never came across any scenarios where I had to actually use ng do check. But in case you need it, keep it in mind. It's really costly, and probably you can avoid it by using probably streams, right? So probably RxJS may help you in case you need it. What is this? Okay, so ng do check, I think I have this implementation, so I'll remove it, or let's keep it. I mean, there's no harm here actually keeping this event. But the only thing which I will do is I will just comment this console.log so we don't get a lot of noise in consoles. Let's move on. And okay, so I thought my voice is not visible. Sorry, I thought my mic was on mute. Uh, Great. So now let's move on, and the next thing which we are going, the next event which we have is ng after content in it. So as the lifecycle loop itself says, right? So this event is actually called after your contents are initialized on your component. So what is a content, right? So anything which is related to content projection. So let's see how we can actually utilize this, and for this we are going to create a new component. So let's go ahead and see that. So I'll create a new component, and it's going to be orders. Okay, so let's do nggc, and this is order component. Okay. This is where I needed it. Okay, so we have new component called orders, and let's see how we can use the after content in it. So first thing which we have to learn before we move on to after content in it is content projection. So let's see how, first let's talk about what content projection is. I'm sure everyone might have used content projection somewhere. So a simple example is your projectors, right? So what you do using projectors? So using projectors, we actually display the content of some other device on a projector. So the data actually, or the content is actually owned by some other devices, right? Maybe your TV, maybe your laptop, but where it is projected, it's projected on your projector. So does your projector owns the data? No, it doesn't. It is only responsible for projecting the other's data or the content from other machine. Similarly, the content projection is a technique by using which a component can render someone else's data. So what kind of scenario is this? So let's say by using content projection, what we can do is we can actually give the functionality to your developers that they can render whatever they want inside an HTML tag. I don't, so that particular component does not contain or does not own anything. So it will be just like a projector where a developer can go ahead and project anything they want. So let's take a simple example where we want to actually give a placeholder, or we want to give a projector to our developers where they can display, let's say, product and order both. So right now product does not contain anything, it says order works. Sorry, orders does not contain anything, it says order works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more component. So I'll say ngc and I'm going to call it as container. Sorry, spelling mistake. Sorry. So this component is called container. And let's start from the basics, right? So let's see how we can actually do the content projection. So in Angular, you have something known as ng container tag. No, sorry, not ng container. Ng container is something which we'll talk about later, but we have something known as ng content. Okay, so this ng content works like a projector. So once I place an ng content on my HTML tag, it means now anyone can present whatever data they want here. So let's take some example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place here. Let's comment this as of now, and let's see the name of our container. So it should be ecom container, and let's go back to your HTML. Okay, so ecom container, and now within this HTML tags, I can do whatever I want to. So I can just place h1 tag and I say this is a container component. Also, I can place another one, and I can probably render the product component. I can also create another one, and I can render, let's say, this order component, right? So and let's go ahead and see the component now. Did I stop the component? Okay, so we have that. Okay, this is sorry, I have to serve again now. So I stopped the compiler somehow. So what I've done is we have placed, of course, the com container. I mean, I can use it at as many as time I want to. And then I placed multiple components inside this. So at one place we have just h1. At this place we have product. We have ecom order. Let's see how it looks like. Okay, so you can see we have this is container component, then this is your entire product component, and that at the end you have order box. Let's inspect this particular element and you will see they are wrapped inside ecom container. You must be wondering, okay, why we cannot do the same with other component? Is basically we cannot, right? So right now we don't have any ng content placed inside product or ecom order component. So here, if I try to do the same using ecom product, right? So let's do this. I'll comment this out, and here if I do something like this, right? So try to achieve the content projection here. So and let's go back and see. So of course you cannot see that h1 tag available anywhere. So if you see ecom product, it is not even rendering that h1 tag, right? So it's not available anywhere because of course your product component does not contain the ng content. I mean, it doesn't contain any placeholder to actually render anything which is placed inside this HTML tag. So in case you need such functionality, make sure just go ahead and place an ng content on your container component, and then you can render anything you want. So ng content is similar to your projector. So I'll comment this out and then let's enable this. And let's and see some other usage of ng content. Mhm. Now, using ng content, I have hey, hi. Now using ng content, you can achieve one more thing. I have seen a real-time example where actually we had to create a reusable navbar, okay, or you can say, yeah, kind of navbar, because that contained our sidebar, your top navigation, your header, footer, everything, right? So, but we had to make sure that the developers who is responsible for designing those pages, they actually mention it or place it in a specific order. I mean, of course, they should not go ahead and create side nav on the left side, right? On the right side, sorry. Or they should not actually place the sidebar in your footer. So what we can also do using ng on content is you can also create your projectors, and then you can also tell that okay, this particular component should be placed here and this component should be placed here. So let's take an example. So I'll go ahead and create multiple ng content. So what we are going to do is we are going to render product as well as order component. So we are going to place this two component on our view, and but they will be rendered in a specific order. So let's say I want products to be first and then order. So let's see how we can achieve using the ng content. Sorry. So I can do ng content, and I can pass a select property here. So select is equals to, and then you can give the select is equals to your selector of your HTML tag. So here I can, for product, I can say ecom product. And similarly, I can place orders. So I think it's order. And I can place an empty one because anything apart from this two, if they are available, they will be rendered here. So we have ecom product and ecom order, and then at the end we have ng content. So now I gave this container component to my developer, and now developer is responsible for placing or creating a new order component on the product component. And he can, the developer, he or she developer can actually go ahead and place this components in any order, doesn't matter. So let's see how it gets rendered. Here I can go to container. I'll move this product. So I'll move everything inside a single container. Now I'll remove this multiple containers which we had. But let's see the sequence. So I'm placing an h1 tag at the start. Then I'm placing a product, and then I'm placing an order. Let's see how it is rendered. So let's go back to CE container. So you can see the product is rendered first because of course in our container we said go ahead and place ecom product here. So whatever component where the selector matches with the com product, go ahead and place first. Then we said next should be order. So order is next. And then we said there is an empty content and ng content which is available. And whatever content which is available which does not matches to this two, go ahead and add here. So this is what we can achieve using ng content. You can also place multiple tags. So I can do this as well. So here, so let's say I want to render product order multiple times. So how many times is this? 1, 2, 3, 4. This will still work. So you can see you will have order works 4 times, but at the same place. I mean, it's not like we have said, okay, this is selector, so this will match the first component and then it will not match rest. It's not like that. So any number of selectors, any number of component matching this selector will be rendered here. So if I have placed multiple times order works, it will work. So it will be rendered here. It's really useful in case you want to create some dynamic component. Probably that will be a little bit advanced, not to be not supposed to be covered in this course, but yeah, we can do live stream later on where we can see some examples, some advanced example of using ng content. In case you need some example, I think go through Angular material code base. I think you can get some examples. Okay, so this is ng content. And now let's talk about this lifecycle loop, right? So we now know a little bit about ng content, that okay, it's like your projector where you can actually project someone else's content rather than actually owning the data. So let's talk about lifecycle loop now. Okay, so the lifecycle loop which we are supposed to talk about is after content in it. So we will implements. Sorry, implements is already there. So I have to say after content init. And then we can say ng after content init. And right now let's do console.log and say after init is called. What happened here? Okay, something else. Okay, so let's go to console and see if our after content is called. Yes, it is called once, because uh, right now let's talk about first after what is content, right? So here, if you see this container component, does it own the content? The answer is no. Your container component does not own any content. We are presenting the contents from some other component on this component. So if I have to know about the component which is placed here and probably perform some operation on these components, where I can do that. These components won't be available inside ng on init, because uh, in this case we don't. Our view, basically our component doesn't contain anything. It's like just a content which is coming from somewhere. So the best place to get the information about what kind of content you have available is the after content init. It means if you have placed anything on your component which is like presenting someone else's content, the contents are available now, the contents are initialized, and if you want to access them you can go ahead and do it. But the question is how to access them. This is where there are two more decorators which can help us. One is content child and second is content children. So let's see, if let's say we want to get the access to ecom product. Let's try to do that. So what I can do is I can use @content child, and we can pass the component here. So what a component I need is product component, and then I can create a variable product component, which is type of product component. So now we have this product component tag available. Let's try to actually access this in ng on init. Of course, we know that it is going to return undefined, but just to make sure that uh, we are actually not getting anything. And then same console.log here and see what we get here, right? So we have created one content child. So we are trying to get the information for this particular component once it is actually initialized. So it has no initializer. Let's see. Okay, looks like laptop is taking some time, so it's switched on performance mode. Let's see. Cropped frames 81%. Are you getting some delay by any chance? because OBS says there are some dropped frames. I'm not sure why, but let's see. Okay, this is the problem when we enable the. I think this is something which can work. Okay, cool. Okay, if anyone is online, can you confirm if you can hear me properly? Okay, so what we have done here is we have created a content child, and we are getting the access to this product component, and let's go ahead and see what we get here. So, hmm. So here, container component.ts line number 20, which is of course our ng on init, we don't get anything related to our product component. But if you go to this line number 26, which is of course our after content init, you get the information about product component here. So you can see it says, okay, it has all the information about your product component. It says, okay, this is the header, this is the property hidden, this is product list. So all the properties, right? All the properties related to your product component is now available at this point of time, and then you can do probably whatever you want to do with product component. You can change the property, you can probably call some action, probably call trigger some event on product component. So you can do whatever you want on this at this moment of time, or at this lifecycle loop. Similarly, in case I want to do, let's see, so we have multiple instances of this orders available, right? So what in case I want to access this orders? Let's try with after content, same. So first let's try with content child, and then we can see what's happening. So I'll go ahead and here. So let's create another content child and try to access. Uh, this is order component, right? Order component. And here we can say this is order component, and same here. So I can say order component. Let's try to access order component here and see what we get. We have placed multiple instances of order component. This dot order component. Yep. So what we get here, so we have order component and it does not contain any property. So we are getting ng context. So let's change this. Let's go to order component and create some, add some properties here. So I'll say, okay, this is orders is equals to order title. From title is equals to order placed, and let's display this here, h1. Okay. Right, so we got this order title property which is available, but strange, right? I mean, we have multiple components and we are still getting the access to only one. So how to get the access to others? So this is where we can actually use content children. So let's go back and change this content child to children. And we have to, of course, change something. So we have now this can be content children, and this can be type of query list of order component. So let's see now what we get. So remember, using content child, we got access to only one component. Now we are using the query list. So we are using content children, but to use content children, you have to pass here query list of order component. And now we get access to all the instances which are placed here. So this is how you get the information. So you get length. So how many components which we have. So length is 4. So 0, 1 to 3, which is 4. Then you get access to the first component instance and last component instance. If you want to go through each and every component, you can actually go ahead and, of course, write for each or for of loop. In results, you get you can see all the components are available here. So I can probably look through it and change the values as well. For example, let's do that. So I can say for let order of this dot order component, and then here I can say order dot right. So order title is equals to new title. Okay, so I'm looping through each and every component instance which is available and changing it to new title, and it works. So, but you have to make sure you are doing this inside the this lifecycle loop after content init. It won't be available on your ng on init. So in case you want to access anything which is projected via content, so you have two options: either use content child, or in case you have multiple instances of the same thing, you can use content children. This content children is very uh, is really helpful in case you have some dynamic component and you want to create let's say you want to create your own drop downs, right? So what you can do is you can actually give some tags to your end user, and in behind the scenes get the all data from query list, right? So you have access to all the data here. So number of times you place this component, and from this data you can pick the properties. Probably, let's say you have key values, right? So you can take those key values and create some other component. So that's absolutely fine. I mean, this is a real-time example, which is, I think you can find an example in Angular material code base. So this is after content init, and let's go ahead and see which we can start. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I think this is enough for the day. So let's see. Let's go ahead and see what we learned today. So we started with small introduction about your architecture diagram. Then we spoke about Angular modules and how your ES module and Angular modules are different. Then we talked about component lifecycle loop, where we spoke about ng on init, what can be used or what can be done using ng on init, ng on changes, where we discussed how we can communicate between two components using input and output. We discussed about parent and child communication. We also spoke about how we can actually minimize the code and we should not write logic inside your child component. Then we spoke about change detection strategies. Then we spoke a little bit about ng do check, and now we discuss about content projection, and we also discuss about the lifecycle loop called ng after content in it. So let's meet now next week, next Saturday, and we will continue with rest of the lifecycle loop. And if possible, we'll also cover built-in pipes. Probably, I think we should be able to complete built-in pipes and move on to view encapsulation. So let's see. So yeah, that's it for the day, and see you all next Saturday. Bye everyone.